Well, good morning, automators, engineers, builders, and janitors. My name is Jason Grimes. I'm a site reliability engineering expert from Concur. That's back in the States, over in Seattle, Washington. We don't have quite the skyline you guys do. The weather here is amazing. This is my first DevOps Day Tel Aviv. It's been awesome. Seriously, everybody's been, thank you. So today, why are we even here? I'm going to talk a little bit about Concur's journey as they move and break up the monolith. And we're going to talk about our DevOps journey and how it might be similar to some of the DevOps journeys that you have begun. So Concur has recently gone a transformation where we went from 2 major releases per year to 700 developers owning their own code in production. So I'm a SRE manager. I manage one of 2 teams, and we're responsible for enabling those developers to run code in production. And so we need to advise them, give them the best tools and practices. So before I start, do you guys follow me here? DevOps is really about sharing. It's about this time right here where we all come together and we learn. This picture is at Chef Software headquarters in downtown Seattle. We meet every other Fridays, and we're to level up and to get better. So who am I? I'm Jason. I'm a dad, mountain biker. I'm into music, into STEM, site reliability engineering. I'm a DevOps champion. I'm interested in obviously team building, leveling up, and recruiting. So a little bit about me. I'm old. I used a Commodore 64 when I started. I was playing Frogger on my dad's tape drive. I have a decade of on-premise data center experience. With that, you could probably buy yourself a coffee. Not super exciting. I transitioned to DevOps and SRE in 2015 with Concur. I'm a STEM parent interested in science and technology. I believe in a growth mindset. And what I've really tried to do in the last couple of years is open source the things I do successfully and continue to learn from the field, such as everybody here. So what will you walk away with? What do I hope you'll walk away with? One, you'll have a little bit of a DevOps journey at Concur. What has that transition been like? We're going to talk about the people, the commitment, and the journey. We're going to talk about building great teams and not just tool sets. And of course, measuring the customer experience. And I'll touch on, obviously, level up. And then my favorite topic is the automators. So who is Concur? Concur provides visibility into travel, expenses, and invoice-driven spending. How many people here use Concur? Okay, we have some folks here. So what do we see on a daily basis? We see a lot of folks uploading receipts. I would say 2.4 million expenses uploaded each day, 275,000 trips booked. But the number that I'm most proud of is the invoices processed. So what does our DevOps journey look like? So I mapped out our journey, and I also married it with the cell phones I was using at the time. So back in the waterfall days, I was using a BlackBerry. We had releases every 9 to 18 months, not very customer responsive. If we bet wrong, it cost us, and it cost us big time. And we were on-premise services at that time. That's in the late 90s, early 2000s. And the ops model was formerly an IT moving to ops. So shortly after that, in the mid-2000s, we moved to a mixed environment. Releases were about every 4 months. We were improving our velocity. We still have that monolithic hybrid. So we have Saturday deployments. Nobody likes Saturday deployments. That is about the same time the iPhone 3G came out. And the period that we're in today, I've got in blue, and we're using the software development lifecycle. We're using Agile. I think most of the folks probably use Agile here. We update our releases once every month, and we have what we call microservices aspirations. We have every intention to move to a fully microservices environment, but right now, the monolith does pay the bills. The model that we currently deploy that we've been using since 2015 is DevOps. And the phone I'm currently using is an iPhone 7. But what does the future look like? It's not very different than right now. As some of the other speakers had mentioned, more tools, more software. But the release cycle will be continuous. We want to deploy thousands, if not tens of thousands of changes every day safely to production. The architecture will be fully microservices. And the model that we'll use to support this won't be very different than what it is today. It'll be DevOps, only you'll have the option to be embedded within teams. It's not currently where we are today. So I want to walk you through my journey through some of the people that I learned from the most. One of the gentlemen I used to work for, David Getty, some Microsofty now. Back when we were doing waterfall releases every 9 to 18 months, he would say, reliable, repeatable results over time. And I would pound that into my head as an up-and-coming ops manager, wanting to be reliable, providing a high level of service. And at this time, I was actually the manager of a technical operations team that was doing online courseware. So we had 250,000 students taking courses online every day. And so we were trying to be reliable, just as a school would. But in 2006, did anybody remember what happened in 2006? AWS came a-knocking. And Werner Vogel said, you build it, you run it. And I'm curious, how many folks have heard that? You build it, you run it? Most folks in here? Okay, it's been a principle for a long time. But yeah, outstanding. And in 2010, John Willis, Damon Edwards, and Jez Humble came up with this idea of CALMS, this culture, automation, lean, measuring, and sharing. And Jez actually added the L a little bit later. But it's this idea that with these core principles, we're going to build and service a team. And DevOps, as you know, is mostly about a culture. And what we want to do is go from this culture of waiting time to submit tickets and sitting in queues to actually helping out and enabling people. So in 2013, Concur officially started our Microservices journey and SRE journey. And our releases, as I mentioned, were every month, and our ops model is the DevOps. And in 2016, in DevOps Days Seattle, I was sitting out somewhere where you folks are. And Nell Shamrell was up, she's from Chef, and she said, you know what? Let go of being right and meet people where they are. And I was like, what? I'm always right. Like, I had to let go. And it was an incredible epiphany. So what I try to do is take that back to my 700 developers at Concur, meet them where they are in their stack and at their level, and help them along the journey. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. But what will the future look like? So Alice Goldfuss, she works at GitHub now, used to work at New Relic. I fast follow her. She's outstanding. She recently said at DockerCon, everyone should do everything. And the model that would support that would be an embedded DevOps model. She also challenged her teams to never get paged for the same event twice. And I ask you to challenge that and bring that home to your guys' organizations. So building great teams, why are we here? So this is obviously the Golden State Warriors basketball team. They're the world champions. Each person there has a role. They all know their role, but they're all committed to playing defense and ball movement. Each player brings their own experience, their own perspectives, and their own skills, and they often overlap. I want to do the same thing with SRE and DevOps. I want to build great teams of folk, great teams of people. Tools are nice. Tools aren't going to solve your problems for you. So what does end-to-end mean? If we're telling our 700 plus developers to own their code in production, what exactly does that mean? It means different things to everybody, right? Well, these are the 9 things that it means at Concur. Design, code, build, test, secure package release, configure, and run. So we try to find out ways to make it easy for our developers to do those. But we couldn't do it without the people, the commitment, and the buy-in that we have. We have executive buy-in. We have a VP of DevOps all the way up to mirror our engineering organization. As mentioned before, we believe in a growth mindset that think people can be coached, that they can be encouraged to do better. Following an agile operations where most folks here are familiar with agile. But the last two, or the middle two, are the one I want to mention. So blameless culture. That's so hard. A lot of failures occur, and many of you folks know this because someone made a change. Someone made a mistake. And if you have the kind of culture that empowers people to let you know of that change, it'll save you a lot of time in looking for it. So blameless culture is big. Welcome failure. At Concur, our busiest days are on Mondays. Everybody is home on the weekends. They submit their expense reports, and they come Monday morning, everybody wants their money. So on Mondays, we say that production is often on fire, and it's how we handle those situations. And ultimately, it doesn't work without a work-life balance. So culture is not a tool set, right? there's no amount of talks that's going to fix the culture in your organization, right? You need to come up with those things that you can bring back to your organization that provide the transparency to get things done. It's not a piece of software you can subscribe to. So you need to cultivate a great culture. And this is one of my lessons from last year that I took away. And clearly standing before you today, very humbly, it's amazing. SRE is a global team sport. We couldn't do it without each other. I have a Prague team. We're roughly like 12 to 13 hours apart. When they roll off at night, we roll on in the morning. And it is a global team sport. Oftentimes when we're handling, let's say, a P1 or a customer issue, we'll start in Europe, and then as we roll to American hours, it'll roll to our team. But we're really trying to improve that communication in that global team sport. We're also trying to fight pager fatigue and all these other things. And when you have these distributed teams, it allows you to take advantage of that. So what matters? It's different for everybody. How we are managing it is our true north is the Net Promoter Score. If you're not familiar with it, that's essentially customer satisfaction of how you're perceived in the market. And it's a number that is published and we drive to. So it's all about service and how we handle it. And especially during, let's say, a priority 1 incident or a crisis response. It's not just resolving the issue and restoring service as fast as you can. It's providing the assurance that this is what happened. You were affected, you were not affected, and timely, updating folks. One of the other things we focus on is codifying everything. That's really hard. We have New Relic monitoring, and a lot of the monitoring can be set up through the GUI. But we can also codify the alerts and put them in what's called the NERCL query language. It allows us to check that in, and we won't have necessarily and it'll be managed in code. And the one thing we know about managing things in code is that's the one thing that's handed off from one person to another person to another person in an organization. We can't guarantee that docs and wikis will be there, but the code will be there. And probably this middle one here, CI/CD and employee happiness. What do I mean by that? So continuous integration and continuous delivery doesn't just make it faster to ship features for your developers and your PMs. It also improves your happiness. Like, we want to get to a fully CI/CD orchestration so that we don't have those Saturday deployments. We don't have that monolithic downtime. And the other thing that we're focusing on is minimum viable ops. We call that at Concur batteries included. It's essentially the idea that if you're going to give some developers some operational tools, you also give them the necessary baselines to be successful with those tools. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then automate pretty much everything. That's pretty standard. So what do our tool sets look like? I didn't list them all. So what do our tool sets look like? I didn't list them all. We have, obviously our source control is GitHub. We're heavily reliant on PagerDuty. And I knew you'd like to hear that. Jira is our primary bug tracking and workflow software. But ChatOps, how many people are familiar with ChatOps here? Oh, awesome. So for the folks that don't know, we're bringing operational information into the room where you already are. In our case, it's Slack. We have all sorts of ops info flowing into different channels within Slack, and we have different responses based on what we're seeing. We have outside-in monitoring through .com Monitor, and we could also use New Relic synthetics. So we primarily have 2 types of data at Concur for the SRE team. We have the APM, or the New Relic data, and then we have the RUM data that we have to keep track of. And then for the logging, we use the ELK stack. So measuring the customer experience. I love this quote. The gal pictured to the right is Charity Majors. She runs Honeycomb monitoring. I shouldn't have said Honeycomb in the Valley. So she wore this shirt the other day, and she took a picture of 9s don't matter if customers aren't happy. Have you guys heard that before? Think about it. Like, our SLA is 99.5, and we manage to that, pretty well. But do any of those numbers matter if our customers are angry? They're not happy with how they're being changed, how we're informing them. And the one thing Charity, she actually visited our coffee ops in Seattle, and she came up and she said, think about what you're doing with monitoring. She said, you've been monitoring for 20 years, right? You have a problem, you do your root cause analysis, and you create a couple new monitors. And then you create a couple more monitors. And then the amount of fatigue that goes on and the maintenance with that makes it very difficult to manage. So she actually says, if you're gonna look for things, look towards observability. What is going on in production, specifically as it relates to latency, request per second errors, and saturation. And if you looked at those 4 key areas, sure, you're gonna be logging all the other statistics, but you're not looking for blinking lights on a dashboard. You're looking for how production is performing. The other thing she talks a lot about is the need for having scripts that go both ways to production. You don't just deploy to production and it's a one shot to the moon. You need to make sure that there's rollback capabilities so you can roll forward and roll back. That's pretty key. So minimum viable ops. To the right, I have a little animated GIF that was created by an intern on our team, Brittany. It's the idea that you need batteries included with the toys you get in order for them to work. In our case, our developers are the ones receiving the toys, and we're helping them measure those. These are 4 sample counters, the app, disk, CPU, and memory, and we're helping them load up with each new microservice that turns up. So the critical thing is we have our ChatOps operation with our New Relic monitoring, PagerDuty, and Slack integration all in one place and all informing us of how is production behaving. Obviously, I mentioned this before, the only single source of truth is that code. And we do what we can to codify the alerts. This is probably my favorite slide. I think it's all about sharing and welcoming new ideas from the field. In the 90s and the 2000s, when you'd go into work at Microsoft and you'd go, oh, I got this, you'd shut the door to your office. How many people have offices here? As opposed to open desks. So today, the culture is very different. We can't do it without folks in the field. We can't do it without your stories of how it works in production for you. And take that back to your team. I do think local meetups matter. That picture right there is of our coffee ops group. And as I said, we meet every other Friday for about an hour and a half. And I know there's also a DevOps group here in Israel, and I think they're having a meeting tomorrow night. If you guys get a chance to make it, there's going to be about 125 automators there. And then obviously conferences. Yeah, you guys are here. That makes sense. Okay. I'm going to lose a few people here. How many people are on Twitter? Okay, there's a good portion. Okay. Twitter's a data source, full of valuable data by a lot of knowledge subject matter experts. I picked out 4 of the folks that I follow: Alice, Kelsey Hightower, Jesse Robbins, and Jeff Smith. And I created a list of automators, essentially 900 automators around the globe. Many of the folks that are on Twitter here, I've tried to make sure that they're on that. And the idea is that I'm constantly learning from the field and bringing it back home. Now, I'm not suggesting you load up Twitter and you sit on it all day and share Giphies. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you set it up and you have a service, let's say Nuzzle or some other third-party service that looks at your network and says, what is your network talking about? And then it sends me an email every day that says what they're talking about. And it's easy to level up or stay ahead on things. The thing I like about Kelsey Hightower, he's the Kubernetes. Has anybody seen Kelsey speak? Okay. All right. Okay, cool. So he makes it accessible for everybody to understand what he's doing. And he's a big advocate. You don't necessarily have to be the world's most renowned expert to give a talk. I mean, I'm speaking to you today. So Jesse Robbins, he's the original master of disaster at Amazon. He doesn't tweet a whole lot. He's probably most famous for his picture of his fireman outfit at work at Amazon, fighting fires. So anyway, if you go to that list is available. Make sure it's HTTP, and you can actually see the 900 people that are on there. It's a shared Twitter list. And if you want to be on there, DM me. If you don't want to be on there, DM me. So takeaways. What do I hope you're going to walk away? Well, one, if you want a copy of the deck, it's right there. So the first thing is what you guys are doing already, which is showing up. That's the hardest part, making the commitment, actually being there. And attitude does matter. People want to work with other people that they enjoy working with. That's not a new concept. So, your attitude does matter. The team, we try to push team first. We're not looking for those rock stars or the ones that need to be in full control. We want to employ a bunch of folks that are able to do any of the tasks, and we have roles that we can define. And we want to learn from failure with the capacity to continue learning. But the last thing I really want to mention on the takeaway is that be active out there. I'm not saying Twitter's your thing or LinkedIn or GitHub, but those are the best ways to those are the best ways to show social proof of what you're doing and share it amongst your fellow automators. So I really think I've done enough talking. This is my contact information. I'd love to hear from you. And also, if you had any questions, I'd love to take time to do some Q&A. Yeah, so that's a difficult issue. So the question is how do you convince management that it's worth doing? So I kind of cheated. I didn't have to do that at Concur. that fight was fought for me before I got there. The idea is that we'd have that executive sponsorship all the way up through, let's say, a VP of engineering or maybe even a specified VP of DevOps. If you don't have that authority and you're looking to move towards an SRE model, I would obviously read the Google SRE tenets, make sure that you feel good, and then what ways can you show value back to your org? One of the ways that the site reliability engineering team at Concur does is 50% of our time is spent coding and improving software and automation, and 50% of the time is research, troubleshooting, and some tickets. So we look for key areas of opportunity to automate, such as that batteries included. And what we do is we show the value by, instead of having to create 700 for each developer, these integrated chat operations, we have it set up at the beginning, and it shows a benefit all the way throughout. I think time saving, automation, and then automating so that failure doesn't occur, to the extent that you could. But that's a tricky one. It's not easy. That was a great question. Yes?
I have a question about what you said that you're aiming to. You're aiming to embedded DevOps, right?
Yes, sir.
That's where you're aiming to. And in that model, you will have the DevOps people embedded in the development teams or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm asking because we're undergoing a similar process in the company I work for. And are you guys aiming to eliminate the centralized DevOps team completely, or?
No, not at Concur. I think we're a little bit behind. So I think that Google is probably doing the most forward thinking. They actually have an embedded model with chargebacks. So it's a service, right, SRE, that they sign up for, and so that there's a certain cost with that. We're not at that model. Right now, we're essentially advisors of tool sets and practices. And we're moving towards sitting embedded with different groups as they need it. But it'll be over time. It's not, and we won't look to dissolve the team immediately. We will probably be moving more folks into site reliability engineering as the paradigm gets more mature. Bless you.
When you talk about batteries included, what was the top one or two things that folks automated? So there's an amazing return on that time.
Wow, that's a great question.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yes. So so we can automate a variety of things, but was there one particular thing that we could automate that paid dividends forward? And I think that was the Slack integration with PagerDuty for us. PagerDuty is our source of truth. When we get paged, we know it. We're not getting notified via customer and email. It comes from PagerDuty. Having that integration built into our apps as we spin them up is super key. Without that, it just made it too complicated for other engineering or other groups to come up to speed with where we are. And being able to have that chat ops architecture in the room that you're talking about is everything to our groups. That's a great question. Well, thank you guys. You guys have been so wonderful. I really appreciate it. Thank you.